Zach Hubert subscribe to the channel.
Entry.
Putin subscribe to the channel.
Entry.
Antoine Murky Jr. subscribe to the channel.
Entry.
The Pixel Man subscribe to the channel.
Entry.
Reginald Miles G7 subscribe to the channel.
Alright, well that's embarrassing. I've been streaming for 20 minutes, and my mic has been muted. This is why we need a, chat. This is why you have your chat on your live streams, because otherwise you're going to miss things like that. And you're going to have to go back and re-explain everything, and the replay is just going to look horrible. But the show must go on, so hello to everybody who somehow got this far in. I'll put a thing in the description and the comments when this goes up as a VOD. Just saying, like, audio starts at 24 minutes in, I believe it is. Because, okay, just rewinding my thoughts real quick. So, to recap, we are ranking every major Transformers show going in continuity release order. And I am naming my tiers after Transformers toy size classes. And so far we have done G1, Headmasters, Super God Master Force, Victory, and the original Beast Wars. And G1, I feel like there is as much good as there is bad with it, but it is also a huge cultural milestone for not just the brand, but like pop culture in general. So I kind of put it as the barometer for everything that you measure everything against. Headmasters, I only got halfway through and then I kind of burned out because I'm just not into that format of storytelling. And then I've only seen clips of Super God, Master Force, and Victory, so they kind of just went down here because I like what I've seen, but I also know I wouldn't enjoy watching full episodes. And then Beast Wars also got put in the middle ranking just below G1 because I feel like Beast Wars is as culturally significant for children of the 90s as G1 is for children of the 80s. But I don't have a lot of personal love for Beast Wars. I didn't come to it until way later. It's not my era. I'm not able to sit through a lot of it because the animation just looks so dated to my eyes. But I can also acknowledge there's some really good storytelling there. There's some phenomenal voice acting. And again, it is a huge thing culturally. And also similar to G1 culturally, it has two Japanese sequel shows that aren't as well loved. Beast Wars Neo, I think it is. I've literally only seen like one clip from this show, and it's the clip everybody knows. It's just, there's not much to write at home about because it's just weird toys that only were sold in Japan being marketed to Japanese kids, and it's only being done that way because Japanese kids didn't like the CGI animation in Beast Wars, so it wasn't a huge hit, and Takara had to pivot. So I'm gonna put these in the basic tier as well. I have no love for Beast Wars 2nd or Beast Wars Neo. I like that they're getting more cultural traction now. The fact that we're getting a legacy Tasmania Kid is hilarious and wonderful, but I don't think as shows these are really great or notable. What I do think is much more interesting than either of them is the American sequel to Beast Wars, Beast Machines, which is a very divisive show, I find, because you have the people who were super into Beast Wars when it was coming out and loved it and were all about it, who then went into Beast Machines and went, what the hell is this? They've changed so much, they've turned so many characters' arcs upside down, they flipped them on their heads, this is weird, this tone doesn't feel right, what is going on? But then people who come to it later, or people who have circled back around and have tried to take it on its own merits, tend to really enjoy Beast Machines, tend to enjoy a lot of the thought experiments that are going on in that show. And I just kind of dig Beast Machines personally a little more than Beast Wars, because I like a lot of the design philosophy in that show a little better than the original Beast Wars or even Neo or Second. I think there's some really cool toys from Beast Machines that don't get nearly the love they deserve, or weren't even able to get it at the time because they cut this show short in order to completely revamp the brand again, because they saw that the Beast era was petering out and they had to do something else. So I'm gonna be nice to Beast Machines. I'm gonna put it at the top of the deluxe ranking for now. I might move it down a little bit later in the stream, but right now, I'm sticking with that. Yeah, and that brings us to our first Transformers Robots in Disguise, Robots in Disguise 2001. Which is a very strange show, because it's technically the third Beast Wars anime. It was originally broadcast in Japan as Car Robots, and as I understand it, it's meant to be like their interpretation of the far future of the Beast Wars continuity. But because they had to switch gears so suddenly to get out of the Beast era and move into what would become the Unicron trilogy, it was quickly dubbed and brought over to America as Robots in Disguise 2001 by good, great friend of the channel, Haim Saban. It was Saban's dubbing company that was responsible for this. And it's a weird little thing when it's completely divorced from the Japanese G1 or the Japanese Beast Wars continuity, and it's made its own little continuity. It's something that doesn't get referenced or called back to a whole lot, except for the occasional Generations nod. But there are like some real standout concepts from it. Like you have Ruination, who has his own little cult fandom aside from Bruticus. You have the Autobot triplets of what is it, Expron, Prowl, and one other guy. I'm not super good with this era as far as names go, but you also have Rail Racer, and of course the breakout character from this era, Skybite. If you know nothing else about RID 2001, you know of Skybite. You've seen Skybite in something. And Skybite actually was the character from this show to get inducted into the Transformers Hall of Fame recently. So like, that's all well and good. You have this solid mix of things, and you have a pretty solid actual standard of animation in this show. I think the animation in it is generally pretty good, but it's just this weird little oddity that's off on its own. And if we had like a modern toy of that Optimus Prime, if we had like a legacy RID 2001 universe Optimus Prime, I would probably be a little more inclined to put it higher up in the rankings. But as is, I'm gonna have to go with bottom of deluxe. It's not bad, it's just not great, and it's not really notable in today's market. Now, I could certainly eat crow on that in a few months. We could have a huge resurgence of RID 2001 popularity, but I kind of doubt it. But that brings us to, of course, my era, my golden age as a Transformers fan, being a young boy in the mid to late 2000s, the Unicron trilogy, which kicked off with Transformers Armada. Armada's interesting to talk about for me because I love the Armada toy line. I will go to bat for pretty much any toy from that line that's not named Thrust any day of the week. TJ Omega, I have a date in court with you, sir, over your horrifying accusations towards Hotshot. And I love the Armada game. I played the crap out of the PS2 Armada game as a kid, to the point where, like, there's sections of that game that are just core memories for me. But the Armada show is not great, and I didn't have access to a lot of it as a kid. I had 2 DVDs of about, I want to say 4 episodes each, and we didn't have cable at the time. I never saw the original airing of it, and I didn't know about stuff like the Unicron battles until way later. And then there's also just the fact that, like, the voice cast in this era isn't great. There are some good ones. Like, obviously, I love that they brought Gary Chalk and David Kaye in to be Optimus and Megatron again. I know a lot of people associate them with Primal and Beast Wars Megatron more so, but because of this era, this free show era, they are sort of like my childhood voices for traditional Optimus and Megatron. Even though I like Colin and Welker fine enough. But the rest of the cast, there's just not a lot of standouts in this show. And then there's also just the fact that, like, this show had horrible animation errors on original broadcast because they rushed it. They wanted everything to come out at about the same time, all within a year. And because of that, there's just some really horrendously bad-looking episodes of the American broadcast of this show. They cleaned up some things in the Japanese dub, but overall, it didn't look optimal. And you know, it's weird. Aesthetically and everything elsely, I love this show, but I'm hard-pressed to put it any higher than Deluxe. I kind of want to put it at the top of Deluxe, but then I also have a hard time saying it's better than Headmasters, because Headmasters does have some real standout moments as a show where Armada doesn't really. Like, the Unicron battles, that is a fun concept, because I think that's the first time a major Transformer series really went, yeah, fighting on Earth has gotten old, it's gotten stale, we're just gonna fuck off back to our home planet. And then, oh shit, Unicron's here. Oh shit, he was orchestrating the whole thing the whole time. You know, that concept on paper is brilliant. It's just not executed super well in the show. And it only really leads to one huge standout moment, which is the death of Starscream. However, Headmasters doesn't have like a huge, cool end game, but I like the way Japan handles Headmasters, and I like some scenes from that show. Like, I love the death of Ultra Magnus. I love the big knockout drag down fight between Blaster and Soundwave. And if I'm being perfectly honest, Beast Machines doesn't have either of those things for me. Like, it's a solid overall show, but I don't know if it has like a huge impact for me either. So I think I'm going to move Beast Machines down, actually. And I am going to put Armada between it and Headmasters. I think that feels right to me in this moment. We'll see how things look at the end of the stream. But that, of course, brings us to Energon. And Energon is exactly where I got into it. I got into Transformers, I want to say a couple months into Energon's American airing. Just late enough to still get a few Armada toys as a kid and catch Armada reruns and play the game, but not quite there enough to have fully experienced the Unicron trilogy all the way through. You know, I was kind of more so an Energon kid. There's a lot of stuff from Energon I'm super nostalgic for, specifically design-wise, specifically toy-wise. I love the way that version of Megatron looks. I'm so excited for him to be getting a new toy. This might be a controversial hot take, but I think Fatimus Prime is kind of cool, especially in his super mode. I really like that hotshot design. I really like that Inferno design. That was the first Transformers toy I actually sought out on my own. My first Transformers toy was Energon Skyblast, but I liked him so much that I actually went and looked into what other Transformers toys are available, because I didn't know about Transformers before I had that thing. And I saw, like, oh, there's a fire truck, and I could go find it right now. And my mom and I went to, like, 3 different Walmarts that weekend trying to find it. And we did find it. I still have my original Inferno on the shelf back there. But as a show, Energon is also not great. I would actually argue that it's kind of less great than Armada, even, because it doesn't have like a lot of the blatant animation errors of Armada, but the animation in it feels a lot lazier overall. There's a lot of just models sliding across the screen, static shots of basic lip flaps happening, and like the actual like laser firing and explosion effects are literally just the same stock effect repeated over and over again, and sometimes color shifted. And that's not to say Energon doesn't have its episodes. There's a couple that really stick out in my mind, like, you know, you have the big anniversary episode with all the different Optimus Primes coming back. You have the race episode on Speedia. Those are both super fun, but I also just can't think of like a specific overarching plot thing that Energon really has going for it, and that is a shame, because like I said, a lot of the character designs in Energon are super cool. I like the concept of it's an Earth in the not too distant future that is working together with the Autobots who have reclaimed Cybertron to create like this intergalactic society with all these high-tech cities and ships. And I also really dig the theme song for Energon. That is my Transformers theme with the frickin' obnoxious like techno keyboard guitar solo in the middle of it. I love that version of the Transformers theme, unironically. But ultimately, I think it's gonna be the second to last of the deluxe class. I'm hard pressed to put it over even Beast Machines. I feel like it's kind of less than, because there's also the fact that it drops several balls that Armada had. You know, the Armada kids are shown in Energon multiple times, and they never really get too heavily involved with what's going on. They're just in the background doing stuff as adults, and there's a whole thing with like a plot of Starscream coming back from the dead, and one of those kids he had a huge connection with in Armada, never acknowledged in Energon. Just straight up never acknowledged. And that kind of sucks. But then you get to Cybertron. And Cybertron is actually the one I have the most vivid memories of watching as a kid. Because, like I said, I came into it when Armada was already in reruns. I only really had access to a handful of episodes on DVD. But Energon was on the air, but for about the first 2/3 of it, my family didn't have cable. When I was growing up, there was a large period of the first few years of my life where we didn't have cable and we didn't have high-speed internet. I know it's hard for you to believe with how standardized high-speed internet is in the West now, where basically everywhere has decent Wi-Fi, but there was a time where some families still had dial-up, and they still just had, like, basic bunny ears. But about halfway through Energon, a little more than halfway, we got basic cable, and I was able to start watching the show on TV, and I was also able to watch Transformers Cybertron all the way through as it aired on TV. And to this day, I do not know if it was just the way things were handled in my local area, or I wasn't aware of a different broadcast time, but I specifically remember that Cybertron used to air on Cartoon Network in my area at 5 in the morning. I there was a time when I was a kid, it's 2006, I would have been like 8, 9 years old, where I would get up at 4:30 in the morning every morning and get all my Transformers toys and go out into the living room and watch Transformers and play with my Transformers for like a half hour before anyone else got up in the house. And it was just a very weird feeling, but it also had me very keyed into the show. Of like, this is the special time of the day where it's just me and it's this thing I love. So I have a very nostalgic memory of watching Cybertron. I didn't have a ton of Cybertron toys growing up as a kid. I think because my parents had bought me a ton of Energon while it was still on the air and while it was having its "this is old stock, we're liquidating it out" sales. But I did have a few. I had like Scattershot and a couple others that aren't coming to my mind right now. And I just really enjoyed the show because it wasn't another sequel. You know, it's called the Unicron Trilogy, but Cybertron is very much its own thing. It kind of keys into what had happened before, but it also is just kind of doing its own story. And I found the story with the planet hopping and the different types of Transformers that the Autobots and Decepticons encountered very interesting and engaging. And it was just that right time, right age kind of thing where this was very much my show. This was like, yes, okay, I'm into Transformers now. And of course, right after it finished, that's when the first movie came out, and that's when it was like solidified, I'm a Transformers guy from that point out. So I'm going to place this at the bottom, but I am going to still put it in the mega category, because this one means a lot to me personally. And then we come to animated. I believe it started airing in 2008. Might have been very end of 2007. It was like shortly after the first movie it came out, animated kicked off, because obviously they were developing them both at the same time. And it was very much meant to be like, okay, once the Unicron trilogy is over, we're going to move into something that's pretty different, but also still dynamic and fun in its own way. And animated definitely is that. It has a huge cult following. It is, to this day, still one of the most talked about Transformers shows post its airing. People are always trying to dig up new information and tidbits on stuff that was cut out or what season 4 could have been. And of course, there's been a long clamoring for new animated toys to happen, and we just got confirmation that that's happening in the Legacy toy line. To mixed response. I think they mostly look good. But that's also coming from somebody who is very outspoken and honestly not an animated fan. I get that animated is a huge deal for a lot of people. It is their Transformers, and that's totally fine. That's totally cool. But it's not mine. I liked it. I enjoyed it when it aired. I thought it had a lot of good ideas. I liked the way it handled the Decepticons as like a thing you build to, even though they were like this disgraced and defeated group of Transformers at the start of the show. It still always felt like whenever a Decepticon showed up, that was serious shit. One Decepticon was a huge challenge for that group of Autobots, and I always really liked that concept. But the art style's not my thing. I appreciate that it is popular. I think Derek J. Wyatt was a lovely man. I think he had a really good sense for what people wanted at the time, and I think the same of Eric Siebenabler, who also contributed a lot to that style. But it just doesn't fit my sensibilities. There's certain little things about the show here and there, like the weird servo sounds that would happen whenever somebody would move. Those really bugged me for some reason. I did not like those. Just generally, it's not my Transformers. Which, again, is perfectly fine. But it also means I can't put it much higher than Beast Wars or G1. Because in some ways I would say, and of course you could argue the movie series is this, but I think as far as the shows go, animated is this most recent generations, the 2010s generations version of G1. But it has not quite had the cultural impact where I always hear people talking about animated within Transformers circles, but never outside of it. Whereas G1 and Beast Wars, every couple of months, I'll hear somebody mention either or that I know is not a hardcore Transformers fan. So I think those two have that leg on it up above it. But I don't have the personal love for the show to propel it any higher than them, even though I know that, like, overall, it is a more structurally sound show. Animated has a really good overarching storyline. It has really consistent character development, which is something we hadn't seen in Transformers at all up until that point. And the music in Animated is pretty solid. Its version of the theme is a bop, but I don't know. I just kind of can't put it above those two OGs because there's no personal love there. However, where there is a lot of personal love is Transformers Prime, and I'm going to tell you about that after I take a drink because, wow, my mouth is getting dry. So Transformers Prime. This is my fucking jam, man. I remember practically everything about the 3 or 4 years this show was coming out. I can remember it getting announced and the initial reactions being very mixed on it, of like, oh, they canceled Animated to make something that looks like what if Animated had the movie aesthetic. That's not great. Oh, but this voice cast is kind of interesting. I guess I'll give it... It's on a new channel? Hasbro has a TV channel now? What is going on? Like, I remember that whole lead-up very vividly. I remember being super bummed that we weren't getting the hub with our cable package at the time, and having to watch Darkness Rising, the opening 5-parter, via illegal YouTube uploads, and like begging my parents to get us a cable package or a satellite package that had the hub so I didn't have to do that anymore. I remember the discussion surrounding each episode the week they came out. I remember the wait between season 2 and Beast Machines or Beast Hunters, and all the speculation that was going on at the time. And I remember being a champion of this show the whole way through, because the thing about Prime is I feel like this is the first one where they really stuck the landing in the modern era. They really had this fully realized vision of what Transformers should be as a story, and they did the best possible version of the generic Autobots and Decepticons come to Earth in search of resources in the last leg of their very long civil war. That version of the story, this is where they perfected it, in my opinion. I'll agree with you, not every episode is fantastic. The show overall maybe relies on MacGuffin plots a little too much, but it's never as egregious as things in the Unicron trilogy. And I think the character development across the show is as stellar as it is in Animated, and I think the voice cast of Prime is the best voice cast we've ever had in a Transformers show. This is, in my opinion, Peter Cullen's best performance as Optimus Prime. I know there's people who would disagree with me on that majorly. Even while the show was airing, people regularly said it sounded like he was just phoning it in. I don't agree with that at all. This is Frank Welker's, indisputably, his best performance as Megatron. Maybe not his best performance overall in anything, but the man's had a billion voice roles, so I don't know how you could even judge that. But as far as Megatron goes, I love him in this show. Steve Bloom's Starscream is amazing. Kevin Michael Richardson, I think it is Bulkhead. He's great. Jeffrey Combs as Ratchet. I'm sorry, this is my preferred old man Ratchet. I like animated Ratchet. I love Prime Ratchet. And then, of course, there's the core characters. There's the humans, and there's specifically Jack Darby and RC as sort of this show's version of the typical Bumblebee main human dynamic. And I really like it. I'm not one of those weirdos who ships them. I just think it's a very good, very consistently written friendship. But I love how it develops throughout the course of the series. I love how they're always slowly introducing more players. You know, at times there's third factions. There's different humans who come in and out. There's different Decepticons who come in and out. There's Autobots who come in and out and join up to the main team later in the show. And I think it ends in a very satisfying, the story will go on sort of way. And it stands very, very well on its own as a story within this overall larger aligned continuity that they were doing at the time. Yeah, maybe it doesn't follow through on stuff that the High Moon games set up very well, and it's not exactly the best setup for rescue bots, but as its own thing, I think Prime is just sensational. I love this show, honestly. That being said, though, there is the small drawback of it is fully CGI animated. And because of the CGI animation they did, it's not going to age well visually. It's already starting to show its age, as I talked about a little earlier in the stream. At least I think that was caught in the stream. That might have been when the mic was still muted. There's the fact that it's not going to age well, and there's the fact that it also really hindered it at the time. The way the show was animated was extremely expensive. They wanted it to look good as it possibly could, because it was going to be one of the flagship shows for this new network. And because of that, every character cost like 3 times as much as they would in another show, and they couldn't afford to do as many characters as they wanted to. The writers of this show have gone on record multiple times to say, oh yeah, when we hinted at this character, or we name-dropped this character, that's because we wanted them to appear in the show. We just couldn't afford to do it and also do this other thing that was much more integral to the main plot. So that went up in smoke. And I feel like that is a major drawback with this show. Had it been a 2D animated show and they could have done anything they wanted in terms of bringing characters in and out, it probably would have been a little bit better. Of course, I'm saying that with the benefit of hindsight, but that's just how I feel. And that's why it's not going to be in Supreme Class, but it is going to be our first Ultra Class. I think Prime is the first show of the modern era that really, really got it right and stuck the landing, and it deserves to stand above everything that came before it. I remember regularly saying at the time the show was still airing, if you like the movies and you want to check out a cartoon, check out Prime, because Prime is the movies done right. Darkness Rising, the opening 5-parter, literally is what the first movie should have been. The first Michael Bay movie should have been, in my opinion. I'm now going to take that show's cock out of my mouth to talk about some other shows. Okay, we're going to move on to its spin-off show, Rescue Bots. And Rescue Bots is an interesting beast, I think, because this is when this show kind of marked a huge shift in Hasbro in general, because up until then it had always just been there's a Transformer show that is the flagship show of the brand, and that's how we handle all of our other brands. That's the template that was established with G.I. Joe way back in the day, and yeah, there might be a movie out this year, and there will be a toy line for that movie, but there's one animated show, and that show is what we build everything around. That's where all the eggs go. That's the basket that all the eggs go in. At this point, this is when Hasbro started shifting their strategy and realizing, oh, Transformers has some young fans. It has some much older fans. And the main show can kind of cater to that. But teenagers aren't interested in cartoons or toys at all anymore. We've completely lost them to video games and music. That is just a dead market to a toy company now. So what do we do to supplement that? We make a Transformers show that is specifically for people much younger than our usual audience. We start getting them while they're young. And Rescue Bots clearly did an amazing job at that, because I remember at the time hearing a lot of people who were older fans, much older than me, like 15, 20 years older than me, and had kids of their own saying, yeah, I hate the movies, I don't care for Prime, I kind of wish we were just getting more animated, but this Rescue Bots thing is kind of fun. I put it on with my kids, we watch it, we enjoy it, I buy them the toys when we go to the grocery store, and that's kind of my Transformers thing now. So it was a huge hit with little kids at the time, who are probably in their early to mid-teens now, and old G1er parents who were watching it because they wanted to watch something that was familiar to them, but their kids could still enjoy. And the G1 cartoon isn't as widely available at the time as it is now, where literally it's on most streaming services. Most Transformers cartoons that have aired in the West now are available on most streaming services, and even on the official Hasbro YouTube channel. You can just watch pretty much everything but Earthspark on YouTube for free now, which is awesome. However, that being said, Rescue Bots was very much not for me when it came out, because I was a teenager. I was the rare anomaly teenager that was actually into analog toys and cartoons in the 2010s. And I tried watching Rescue Bots, because I was like, well, I'm a Transformers fan in general, I should still give this the time of the day. And I watched 3 episodes of it, and I went, this is good. It's not for me. I don't love this. And I have so much other stuff on my plate right now that I'm not going to try and keep up with this just because it's Transformers. But I would say, as far as cartoons made for kids in like the preschooler, toddler age bracket, it is as good as Prime. It is just as good as that show. So I am also going to put this in Ultra, but I'm going to put it below Prime. And there's, of course, another show that happened around this time that I could talk about, Transformers Go. But for some reason I couldn't find a tier list that featured that. And it's also a Japanese exclusive that I've only seen clips of. So I would probably just put it down in basic, because I heard the toys from it aren't even that good and they never looked interesting to me. So just imagine Transformers Go is probably actually at the bottom of basic. That's all I can do for that is lip service. But then we come to the second Transformers Robots in Disguise, or RID 2015, which is a show I don't have a great relationship with, because it was marketed as, this is the next installment in the aligned continuity. It's a direct sequel to Prime, taking place a couple dozen years later, and Bumblebee's going to be the main character now, because he got his voice back at the end of Prime, and he's trying to live up to Optimus's legacy, now that Optimus is long gone, and Cybertron has rebuilt. He's trying to be the next great Autobot leader. And it's essentially just Transformers meets Batman Beyond, but not as good as either, which is especially upsetting because they even got the guy who voices Batman Beyond to voice Bumblebee in this show. And it's just kind of meh. It's just kind of eh. I mean, I like ideas in it. Strong Arm is one of the best new female character designs we've gotten since the 2010s began. The idea of like doing the Unicron trilogy thing of just slapping old names on new characters, which are like, what if it was a robot that resembled a Earth animal, and it's still turned into a vehicle. That's all very fun. But I just didn't vibe with it. Because I think the animation in this show, even for the time it came out, was bad. It was janky. They were trying to cover up for a very weird art style with a lot of cell shading that didn't work. And it just overall didn't look great. And you also have the fact of it was marketed as, okay, this is a new jumping on point for kids, but it's also a sequel to Prime, and it never felt like Prime. It never felt like a sequel to Prime, even though it stars that version of Bumblebee. There's a lot of characters from Prime that come back in the later seasons, and I've watched clips of them in this show, because, spoilers, I haven't finished the show. And it's just, it's not great. I don't like Robots in Disguise 2015 very much at all. And aside from Strong Arm recently getting a legacy figure, doesn't feel like it's had much of a cultural imprint. I feel like it's as about well remembered as the original Robots in Disguise. But writing wise, it is a better show. It does have some much more modern Western sensibilities to it. The characters do develop a little bit better, and there are some decent arcs to it. So I am going to put it at the top of Deluxe. Because everything I've heard about this show says that overall it is a better show than anything else in Deluxe, but I'm hard-pressed to put it any higher than Deluxe because of my personal feelings. So that's that. And we are now out of, we are now officially into, shows that I saw as an adult. Because Robots in Disguise came out, towards the tail end of my teen years. Prime was, I want to say 15, 16 was when that kicked off for me. But Robots in Disguise, I remember it happening when I was in my later teen years, and I was full on of the mind of, okay, this doesn't feel like more Prime like it said it was. And I got other shit to do, I gotta go to work. So, yeah, no, I'm not making the time for this. Especially because it's airing at weird times on Cartoon... Was it on Cartoon Network? I think it was on Cartoon Network. It might have been on Nickelodeon, because I'm pretty sure the hub was gone by this point. Well, it doesn't matter. That's where I'm ranking it. And that, of course, brings us to the Prime Wars trilogy. The Machinima-made Transformers show. It's weird. Because, I will say this. Each installment in the Prime Wars trilogy does feel distinct. But only in that, the stories don't connect up. They don't really lead into each other. There's a slight tease for the next show at the end of the first two. Each of them. But it doesn't feel like a consistent story running throughout. They do feel fairly separate. They do feel really just like they're kind of their own mini movies. And they're not particularly good movies. This is definitely the first show where I'm I don't have anything nice to say about this. I'm not going to try and apologize for this show. The Prime Wars trilogy was just bad. The animation was really janky and choppy. The character models looked very slapped together from an evergreen template. The pacing was all over the place. The characterization was very poor. And just the main plot lines of each show really struggled to make the most basic sense. I did not care for these at all. I did not even watch past the first episode of Titans Return. I was just this is bad. This sucks. And keep in mind, this was coming out at the time that I was establishing myself in the Power Rangers fandom, that I was getting into wrestling, and I didn't even come back for Jason David Frank as a Transformer. I didn't come back for Samoa Joe as a Transformer. I was just nah, this is bad. I'm not wasting my time with this. Get the hell out of here. And it made it all the more glaring that it was bad at the time, I remember, too, because they kept marketing it as, this is the Transformers show for adults. This is for the kids who grew up on G1 and always wanted to see the cool, badass Transformers show. I remember the showrunner comparing it to Game of Thrones at the time. And, like, I'm not even a Game of Thrones fan, and I know that is cringy as hell to do in your promotional campaign for your Transformers animated series that ties directly into a toy line that's going on right now. So, yeah, this goes all the way to the bottom for me. I don't like the Prime Wars trilogy at all. I think it's a massive steaming pile. It's basic. So, yeah. Now we come to the exact opposite of that. Cyberverse. Cyberverse really is the little show that could. Because I remember hearing about it in the lead up to it going, this looks pretty generic. This kind of just looks like, oh, we're just taking the Evergreen designs and making a show with it. It was made by a relatively unknown animation studio. It used non-union talent. It didn't even air on TV. Cyberverse was a YouTube exclusive show in the West. Or by in the West, I mean in the States, because I think it did have television airings in the UK. But their budget was really low. The toy line wasn't super robust. It was just kind of a scattershot of here's a bit of everything. And a lot of main characters didn't even get like a main good toy that adult fans would like Windblade. Is the Windblade from the show is only just now getting a good deluxe toy in Legacy, which feels very weird considering how relatively recent this show was. I want to say it started in 2017, and it wrapped up just about halfway through the pandemic. But this show is phenomenal. It does such a good job in its first season of just giving you a grab bag of all of Transformers lore, old stuff we'd seen in animation before, stuff we hadn't seen in a long time, really recent stuff, all within this kind of fun framing device that allows you to tell a smaller story that feels really big. And then season 2 kicks off and they just kind of go like, yeah, basically the G1 cartoon happened, and now we're in the latter days of season 2. We're showing you how season 2 would have moved into something resembling the movies. And then season 3 of the show is just kind of like this G1 season 3-esque insane cosmic multiversal thing that really goes to the most unexpected but delightful places. And then it ends with the war between the Autobots and Decepticons ending, and then there's a 4th season that is the first time we ever in animation properly explore a immediately post-war Cybertron. Because, like, it was in the background of RID 2015, it was implied that there was stuff happening there, but most of that show took place on Earth. This show, there's not even any major human characters in this show. I can't think of any humans that actually appear on camera. You'll occasionally hear humans off camera saying stuff in the 2nd season. But this is the first Transformers show that is expressly about the robots. It's about showing how the war kicked off and how we got to the point we are at the start of season 1. And then showing how that war moves off our planet after it's played out the way we all know it does, and then explores, okay, how does that war actually end, taking into account all the lore we've had since G1, and what does a post-war Cybertron look like? What are these characters like once they stop fighting each other, and they're just dealing with extraterrestrial threats? And it is all really incredibly well done, and for a studio that was given an incredibly small budget and was unknown at the time, Boulder Animation does a fantastic job with the show. It looks leagues and bounds better than either of the two shows that came before it. The animation is incredibly smooth. The models are all appealing and unique, but uniform. They somehow managed to have all three of those elements. And the voice cast, for a non-union, relatively inexperienced voice cast, they all do a pretty good job. I wouldn't say any of the performances are like better than the ones in Prime, but they're collectively so good that combined with the storytelling aspects here, combined with the fantastic animation, this is the first one I'm going to rank supreme. I love Cyberverse. Even though I have a lot of passion and fervor for Prime and a lot of nostalgia for when it was originally airing, I think Cyberverse is better than Prime. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I think Cyberverse is the best Transformers animated series we have had to date. I absolutely love this show. If Prime is the movies done right, Cyberverse is G1 done right, but taking modern Transformers lore also into account. They do stuff as recent as a certain breakout character from the IDW Transformers comics, which weren't that old at the time, pops up towards the end of this show, and he's pretty freaking great in it. And then we go right back down into the annals of shit by looking at the War for Cybertron trilogy, which was essentially everything I've said about the Prime Wars trilogy can be applied to the War for Cybertron one, except it was made by a different animation studio who somehow did just as poor a job, and it was released to Netflix instead of a stupid, now defunct streaming app no one had ever heard of before. So, it is slightly better than the Prime Wars trilogy, the War for Cybertron trilogy is, but it's also not great. I only watched a little bit of each installment, and even then I felt like I spent too much time on it. But, yeah, that's how I feel about the War for Cybertron trilogy. Now, you want to talk about those toys? I'll talk about those toys any day of the week, but that cartoon, no thank you. And then we come to BotBots, which is an odd show. It's the most untraditional, most unique of the show, because it's playing off of a toy line that really doesn't do anything traditionally Transformers. There's no Autobots, Decepticons, Predacons, or Maximals in that show. It is all the BotBots are all essentially good guys and bad guys, and they all have their own different little unique functions and stuff like that. And it's also not about alien robots coming to Earth. It's about a Transformers MacGuffin causing a bunch of household objects to come to life and them all going on silly adventures. I've only watched a couple episodes of BotBots, but it does really feel the most traditionally like silly kids cartoon. But it's got a good humor and wit to it. And the animation, even though it's fairly generic, is solid. So BotBots definitely deserves to be in the mega class, but not that high up. It's good if you want something just to pop on to keep the kids occupied. Go for it. But it's not something I think any fan older than 8 would enjoy watching more than a few episodes of. It's very much the Teen Titans Go of Transformers. If goofy, jokey cartoons are really your thing, you'll love this. But I think the majority of older fans are going to kind of just roll their eyes at it. Because I know I did. I don't personally, hugely dislike it. I was just kind of oh, that's what this is. Alright, whatever. At least the toys are fun. And I kind of have a similar feeling about Rescue Bots Academy, because Rescue Bots Academy is just kind of the next couple seasons of Rescue Bots. They just rebranded it and put the focus on some new characters. I like that it's the first time since the Unicron trilogy we really had a good place for Hotshot in a show. But much like actual Rescue Bots, it's not really for me. It's for a much younger audience. And I only watched one episode of it just to see what Hotshot sounded like in the show. So I would I'd say because it is just kind of the next couple seasons of Rescue Bots, I think it's as good, but I don't think it's going to be remembered as well as the initial Rescue Bots series. So it can still go in Ultra, but it's got to go below the original. And that, of course, brings us to the final show in the ranking, the currently airing, or currently being released? I don't know, it's weird because of the way it's like half streaming, half a main TV show. Earthspark, Transformers Earthspark, which I also really like. Earthspark has obviously only had one season. It's probably going to go for at least one more. I could imagine them having up to 5 in their belt with the kind of storytelling prowess they've showed in the first season of this show. But it's all going to be a matter of time. Right now, I just have one season to judge. And as it is, I think Earthspark is really good. Because Earthspark kind of takes the ball that Cyberverse got to the end zone and then runs a little further with it. Because while Cyberverse gets to post-war Cybertron and explores that in animation, this is the first show that starts in just like, nah, the war is history. It is old news, and this is Transformers in a post-Cybertronian Civil War status quo trying to pick up the pieces. Optimus and Megatron have reconciled, and they're working together with some of the other Autobots and the human government to try and round up former Decepticons and keep the streets clean. But also, there's other things brewing. There's a new race of Transformers coming into existence, and we're dealing with that. We're dealing with this human family that's very multicultural, but also very realistic and grounded and feels very fresh for a group of humans and Transformers. And we're also dealing with a lot of human villains. There are still Decepticons in this show who cause trouble, but the two main overarching villains are humans, and that's really interesting. The way they work with those characters is really cool to watch. I think a lot of the characters in Earthspark are really great. I like most of the Terrans. I like sort of their reimaginings of G1 characters and their interweaving of G1 and Beast Wars-like continuity into the backstory of this show. And I like a lot of the voice performances. A lot of new up-and-coming talent, but also a few established people, and a lot of people you would never think would be associated with Transformers. Like, I never thought I would see the day where I would say, I love Alan Tudyk as Optimus Prime. I love Optimus in the show, that he's just kind of this dorky dad who is trying to do right by his people, and trying to keep everybody happy and on the level. But there's shit brewing beneath the surface that he has to deal with. It's funny. I say Prime feels like the movie's done right. Cyberverse feels like G1 done right within a modern context. Earthspark is the first show in a long time that I've paid clear attention to that really feels like it's trying to do something new, that it's forging its own path ahead, and for that reason I really do like it. I also think the animation in the show looks great. Right now, more so than even Prime, I would say, I'm worried about this show not looking great in the next couple of years, because the art style they chose to go with seems like it could age very rapidly. That's again something we'll only know with time. But in the moment, I'm enjoying the animation from episode to episode. And I also think the music in the show is really good and engaging. Doesn't feel like it's aping too heavily off of anything that's come before it. And just overall, it is a really solid show. I'm hard-pressed to call it my favorite, because I don't want to be that guy who just goes every new one that comes out, that's my favorite now. But I do think it's extremely good. And I do think it's tough, because like there's a part of me that says just put it in Supreme but under Cyberverse. But I don't want to, like... I don't think it's that great, because the one drawback I will say story-wise, I don't love the last batch of Season 1 episodes. I feel like it got a little... It went a little too hard in a few places with those last few episodes. But it can still come back from that. And I can like those better in hindsight. But it's because of those episodes I kind of don't want to put it above Prime. So I think we're going to put it right here in Ultra Class. It's not the best of the Ultra Class. It's not quite Supreme Class yet, but it is really darn good. I am really enjoying Earthspark. I hope the Hollywood strikes end amicably soon so that they can get back to work on that show, because I want to see more of it. But I'm not quite ready to put it over my boys, Prime and Cyberverse. But that is it. That is my whole ranking of every Transformers show. Obviously, people are going to really disagree with me. I think specifically on Beast Wars and Animated, there's going to be some people who really don't agree with that. Haven't had a lot of people in the chat tonight to really let me know how that actually comes out. So if you're watching this on the replay, do feel free to leave a comment and let me know how wrong or right you think I am about certain choices here. But just personally, taking both personal feelings and cultural context into account, this is what I feel like the ranking of all the shows should be. So that's where we're going to leave it. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, everybody. This has been a fun experiment. We might come back and do this again next month with something else if this proves to do okay. But for now, that's really all I got for you. So, hey, thanks for coming out to the stream. If you're watching on the replay, don't forget to give me a like, comment down below, subscribe, ring that bell in order to enable notifications to know whenever I go live in the future, and also get your name up in the alerts like this gentleman.
Entry.
Reginald Miles G7 subscribe to the channel.
And yeah, guys, join me back here next month for whatever we do for a stream then, and any videos that might come out in the future. Bye.